it's the White House that set up September as the time when we would know whether the surge was working or not, and then we would know the way forward in Iraq. And last week, Tony Snow, in his Wednesday briefing, went way out of his way to tamp down expectations and essentially to say that, well, in September we'll have a measure of maybe how things might be going, but it'll be too soon to tell anything.
Well, I think most members of my conference in the Senate, Bob, believe the critical point to evaluate where we are is in September. That's when the big Petraeus-Crocker report is supposed to be presented. I think everybody anticipates there's going to be a new strategy in the fall. I don't think we'll have the same level of troops in all likelihood that we have now. The Iraqis will have to step up not only on the political side but on the military side to a greater extent. We're not there forever. I think they understand that, and the time to properly evaluate that, it strikes me, is in September.
We understand that Secretary of Defense Gates basically gave the Iraqis a September deadline. He said we really have to see some measurable political reform by September. True?
Actually, not quite so blunt. In fact, Secretary Gates had a very good session with Prime Minister Maliki. In fact, he started off by complimenting the Prime Minister and the other leaders with whom he met on their response to the Samarra mosque bombing.
The White House is pressing him for results, trying to say that, look, September is really it. I talked to a very conservative Republican senator the other day, supports the war, and he says, look, we're going to have to see some real progress by September, reasonable control of Baghdad, or we're not going to be able to hold off the Democrats. So the White House is very nervous.
Mr. Bush said, I see it as an important moment because David Petraeus says that's when he'll have a pretty good assessment as to what the effects of the surge has been. But now, sir, a number of top administration officials are downplaying the September report. Are you backing away from how much you're going to be able to say in September?
I am not. In fact, Ambassador Ryan Crocker, my diplomatic wingman here, and I will go back in September and we'll provide a snapshot of where we are at that time. And it will be a forthright assessment of what we've achieved and what we haven't achieved.
The President has called this, quote, a very important moment. What do you expect will happen in September?
What we'll do is we will come back and jointly we will give an honest, forthright assessment. It will be a snapshot, obviously.
And when the Republican leader says, as he did a few months ago and a few weeks ago, and you quoted him when you talked to him, that the handwriting is on the wall, that there's going to be a change in course in the fall, that's not something which he says it might happen. He says the handwriting's on the wall. Now, he ducked the question as to what those words read when you ask him about that this morning. But still, it's a very clear statement that there's a lot of unease among my Republican colleagues with just staying the current course.
This is a president who has made up his mind on Iraq. He's not budging. He's not getting out of there. And I don't think he's really considering any sort of serious alternative to his existing policy, basically, which is to continue until victory, whatever, as he defines it, whatever victory is.
The surge buys time for a political process to get some legs under it, buys time for what Secretary Powell describes rightly as the buildup of Iraqi security force capabilities.
But we do see that time staring us squarely in our eyes, and we're focused on it, and we're going to try to do all that we can with what we have between now and then.
Sheikh Humam Hammoudi, who's an Iraqi member of parliament, himself a Shiite, he was quoted in the New York Times as saying, we have not committed to doing it by September. Maybe the American Congress has made such a commitment, but we have not.
The government feels the pressure that it has to move faster. I think it's doing its best to do. But remember, Wolf, even the United States took 13 years to move from independence to constitution.
Our own experience as a country, in fact, shows how difficult it is to resolve some of these very difficult issues. They recognize fully that our ability to help them in the future depends on the progress that they show over the course of the next few months. They're keenly aware of that, and I think they are going to do everything they can to try to inject hope into places like Washington and elsewhere to show that the Baghdad clock can indeed move a bit faster so that you can put a bit of time back on the Washington clock.
There are two clocks, and the Washington clock is running a lot faster than the Baghdad clock. The effort with the benchmarks is, and the Iraqis say this very clearly, that they want to get this done. It's important to them, but they know it's also a very important way of speeding up the Baghdad clock and putting a little extra time on the Washington clock.
The view is we must get them right instead of you know, forcing them by a certain timetable and so on. The timetable is important, but these are very, very critical issues. I believe the oil law has the highest possibility to be passed, hopefully before September. Also, the Constitutional Commission on the Constitutional Review is going to report to the Parliament at the end of this month. So there is movement on this, but not the speed that our American friends would like to see to be combined with the reports that General Petraeus is preparing for the President and Congress in September.
Today, Ambassador Crocker said things aren't universally negative in Iraq. I think an awful lot of people who've been with the President so far, the Republicans, need to hear more than things are not universally negative in Iraq. The glass, members tell me, has got to be more than half full.
And just accepting another vague report, which is ambiguous from our military leaders that, well, the surge is working in some places and not working in other places. That kind of a mixed report is likely to be the report in September, if that's what the military leaders say. But what is missing is that the purpose of the surge, as stated by the President, is to give the political leaders space in Iraq to work out a political deal, and that's where we see no progress.
Certainly by September, you're not going to see anything resembling a turnaround. Maybe you have some minuscule signs of progress, and that's the best case scenario. We've been talking about a turnaround in the war for the last 3 years, and it doesn't happen.
On Friday, I asked someone in the White House, I mean, what is a realistic expectation of progress that can be shown by September? And the answer was, that's difficult to say. That's just not going to work.
You certainly don't think the job would be done by the surge by September, do you, sir?
I do not. No, I think that we have a lot of heavy lifting to do. The damage done by the sectarian violence in the fall and winter of 2006 and early 2007, as I mentioned, was substantial, and this is a tough effort.
That the Republicans are scheduled, frankly, the way they talk, to panic in September, in a way they ought to. I mean, they're looking at yet another election on Iraq, and you'll be picking up the Republican Party in pieces with tweezers.
If we don't do something by September, is it really because of November of '08 that we're worried? The September of '07, is it about the future of the Mideast, or is it about the future of the next election? To my Republican friends, come September, the Iraqi politicians have not done all the things we wish they would do or they need to do. Then are we more worried about November of 2008, or are we worried about the region and our national interests for years to follow? I would argue that September needs to be viewed in terms of the next decade, the next 20 years, not the next election. Because if we govern this country domestically and internationally based on the next election cycle, you will wake up one day and the world will be a mess.